alert. There's some breaking news regarding Russia's missile attacks on Ukraine. As Joe Biden has approved long-range missiles to be used from Ukraine into Russia, now Russia has fired and retaliated in a very alarming way. Could this lead to a world war? The big question is, did Joe Biden's plan backfire? And/or is he accomplishing what he set out to do? We're going to be joining the BBC News live, and they're reporting of Putin speaking to his nation.
We've also been hearing from Vladimir Putin in the last hour. We're not sure whether it was live or recorded, but we saw him addressing the Russian nation. Let's catch up with what he said. Sarah Rainsford, our Eastern Europe correspondent, has been monitoring events for us from Warsaw. And Sarah, there's been a lot of discussion today about what kind of missile the Russians used to hit Ukraine, but also we saw Vladimir Putin speaking within the last hour.
Yes, Vladimir Putin has been absent really from the scene for a couple of weeks now, and suddenly he popped up with a pretty strong statement, I would say. As it appeared to be live, but it's not clear. It might have been recorded, but it was a very stern-looking Vladimir Putin sitting at his usual desk, flanked by flags, and sending a threat essentially to Ukraine's allies. Now, what Vladimir Putin said essentially was that, yes, Russia had used a new missile to strike Dnipro in southeastern Ukraine this morning. The Ukrainians had originally said this was an intercontinental ballistic missile, which US officials then cast some doubts on. We have now heard from Vladimir Putin saying this was a new Russian missile called Oryeshkin. He said it was a hypersonic ballistic missile, but a non-nuclear missile. He said it was a brand new development. It could move at 2 to 3 kilometers a second, so extremely fast moving, and so fast, he said, that no air defense system in the world could intercept it. Now, he said he fired that, or Russia fired that missile at Ukraine this morning. He said in response to the use of Western missiles by Ukraine fired into Russia. And essentially the message coming very loud and clear from Vladimir Putin was, we have these missiles, we can respond, we will respond. In fact, he said, we will always respond. If people think we will leave actions without an answer, they are very much mistaken. He said his very last lines were, we will always respond. Now, I should add to that, we have heard from the United States, an official there who has talked about these missiles before Mr. Putin made his speech, said, yes, they believe in America this was an experimental medium range, intermediate range ballistic missile. He said, we take all threats to Ukraine seriously, but Russia only has a handful of these weapons. And whilst it is serious, they won't be a game changer. That's the message from the United States. So obviously meant to be threatening from Russia. The message from the United States at this point, we're not too worried. This isn't a game changer, but clearly it is a new missile and certainly a newly, let's say, antagonistic, aggressive sounding Vladimir Putin.
And Sarah, countries for a long time have signed up to deals on what kind of missiles they develop, and they limit the numbers on that. So I'm guessing weapons experts will be looking at any details on this new missile. But in a more fundamental way, as someone who watches these events so closely, how unusual is it for Vladimir Putin to make a statement like this? Obviously, the UK and the US have supplied these longer range missiles this week, and so it has felt like things have stepped up on many fronts.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was Vladimir Putin trying to be categorical because, of course, we've been sort of reading the tea leaves a little bit for the last few days, watching the gradual steps, the gradual actions and responses by Ukraine and its Western allies and then by Russia, and trying to interpret them and to see how far this might go. What Vladimir Putin has come out now and tried to do is to make his threat explicit, to make the danger explicit. Essentially, this is the same as when he signed the nuclear doctrine, reducing the threshold for a nuclear strike. This is all about trying to warn the West off helping Ukraine, trying to stop the support for Ukraine, and trying to end the war on favourable terms for Russia. Just one more thing to point out actually from his address. Mr. Putin also said one thing. He said that Russia reserved the right to use its weapons not only in Ukraine, he said, but against military facilities of countries who are using their weapons against Russia. So essentially threatening Britain, threatening the United States and anyone else who supplies missiles that are then used by Ukraine to strike Russia. He said that the use of those missiles over this past few days had made this a war which now had a global character. It's now global in character, he said. So he is clearly spelling out that he will respond if the West continues to supply these missiles to Ukraine and allow it to use them. It shows a degree of concern, of course, from the Kremlin. You know, these missiles are obviously having an impact, although Mr. Putin played that down. And I think it, raises questions, doesn't it, for supporters of Ukraine about how far they're going to continue to support Ukraine's effort. Of course, Ukraine has been making the point all along, this is an illegal invasion by Russia, an act of aggression, and an illegal war, and its allies are simply helping it to defend itself against that Russian aggression. But it is a rather tense point, I would say, to put it mildly, in the war, which is now 1,002 days old.
Sarah Rainsford, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much.